Good morning, this is Deepak. So I am still in La Jolla, but I'm on my way very soon to Los Angeles, and then I'm boarding a flight to El Salvador. And I'll be there for the next few days before I get to New York. So I will be in Salvador when the results of the election are decided, are announced, and I have already voted, and now I'm detaching and leaving the results to the unknown and surrendering to the wisdom or knowledge or whatever the collective consciousness has in store for us. We have to accept, right? We have to accept what the collective knowledge decides, the collective wisdom decides, if we can call it wisdom, the collective insanity decides, if we can call it that. It does not matter. Those are all our personal judgments. So we have no choice but to accept that whoever the new leader of the so-called free world is, represents the collective consciousness of the United States of America, and to some extent the collective consciousness of the entire world. But before I leave, I want to actually talk about today's topic, which is what is the highest knowledge. And so ever since ancient times, since the time of the Greek philosophers at the temple of Apollo, and in the writings that have come down to us from the sages of the Upanishads and sages of the East, it has been said that the highest knowledge is self-knowledge. Self-knowledge. Know yourself, and you know the universe, because you are, in fact, the universe. So as I was packing right this morning, as I was starting to pack this morning, I thought I'd take a book with me, which I have read hundreds of times, and this is a book by Swami Venkateshananda, Swami Venkateshananda, and it's called the Concise Yoga Vasishtha, the Concise Yoga Vasishtha. And the introduction to this is by a very scholarly person, Christopher Chappell, from the Institute of Advanced Studies of World Religions, Stony Brook, New York. So I have read this, as I said, some version of the Yoga Vasishtha hundreds of times, and I'm writing my own commentary also in it. But the Yoga Vasishtha, it has been said that if you totally grasp the Yoga Vasishtha, then you achieve freedom, moksha, liberation, enlightenment, all those things that human beings seek as higher states of consciousness. So let me tell you a little bit about the mythology of the Yoga Vasishtha, the myth, the story. So Ram in Indian mythology or history, whichever phrase you want to use, Ram is the incarnation of God, just like he's like the messenger of God, like Jesus Christ. He's an avatar. Avatar in India, in the Vedic tradition, literally means an incarnation of the divine being. So he's born to a princely family, and his father is a king, and he sends him when he's a young boy to the great sage, the great rishi Vasishtha for training, for tutoring. And now, in the Vedic tradition, a rishi is somebody who sees, who penetrates through the mask of perception and sees reality as it really is. So, seeing is different than perception. Perceptions are based on our conditioning of the mind, social conditioning and many kinds of conditioning, religious conditioning, economic conditioning, historical conditioning, cultural conditioning, and also the conditioning that results from mythology or the story we've been brought up with as children. So there are many perceptions. In fact, there are as many perceptions as there are sentient beings. And every perception is the result of conditioning. Seeing, on the other hand, is going through the mask of conditioning and seeing reality as it is. So that's what a rishi is, one who sees. When I was with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he would speak of three aspects of being: Rishi, Devata, Chandas. So Rishi is the one who sees, the seer. Devata is the process of seeing, which is the mind, the conditioned mind. And Chandas is that which is seen, but they're all activities of consciousness. They're all activities of consciousness, or that which we call the self. So going back to the story, Ram is sent to the seer Vasishtha for tutoring, and as is the custom in the Indian tradition, Ram bows and touches the feet of the great teacher, the great seer, Vasishtha. And Vasishtha kind of withdraws and he says, "Don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. You are God. You are the incarnation of God." And Ram says, "Okay, maybe that's true, but I have forgotten. So I've come to you to remind me. I have come to you to remind me." And then the teaching begins. And this is a concise summary of the teaching with many stories, many myths, just to illustrate the point that we are all the incarnation of the divine. That we are all the incarnation of the divine. So let me read a few phrases from the Yoga Vasishtha. This is from the introduction where the scholar Chapa is just quoting some pieces from the text. He says, "Whatever is in the mind is like a city in the clouds. The emergence of this world is no more than thoughts manifesting themselves." So what does this mean? This means that our perception of the world is a result of the conditioned mind, starting with thoughts and feelings and emotions and sense perceptions and images, which are all modified forms of our own self. The modified forms of our own self give rise to the experience of our body and of the world. And these modified forms of consciousness are actually nothing other than ourself. So then he goes on to say, all factors of the knowledge process, knower, knowing and known, are actually modifications of the self. So the knower is the seer, the knowing is the process of seeing, and the known is the scenery. So the realization of the mind's power is said to bring great peace, even liberation itself. I'll repeat that. The realization of the mind's power is said to bring great peace, even liberation of the self. Vasishtha tells Rama, having heard that all this is no more than thought, Rama, your questions will be resolved, and you will renounce the influence of past actions, that which we call karma. These three worlds and all of creation are no more than modifications of the mind. When you understand this, you will achieve great peace within yourself. When you understand this, you will achieve great peace within yourself, because the self of the individual is also the self of the universe. And that's all there is. The self modifies itself as mind, body, universe. So now I'm reading from the text itself, where Vasishtha is talking about the experience, or going beyond the experience of the mind, to understanding freedom or moksha or enlightenment. Vasishtha says, moksha, the liberation or realization of the infinite, is not existence as a conditioned creature. Liberation is attained when one arrives in the state of supreme peace, after intelligent inquiry into the nature of the self, and after this has brought about an inner awakening. Kaivalya, or total freedom, is the attainment of pure being after all mental conditioning is transcended consciously and after a thorough investigation. The wise ones say that one is established in pure being or Brahman only after one has investigated the nature of the truth as expounded by the great teachers of consciousness and the explorers of consciousness, and also by seeking the company of and with the help of enlightened sages. As long as psychological limitation and conditioning remain in the heart and the mind, even in their subtle seed state, it should be regarded as the deep sleep state. What we call the normal waking state is actually like a deep sleep. In previous podcasts, I've mentioned Wittgenstein, the German philosopher, having said or quoted him as, our life is a dream. We are asleep, but once in a while we wake up enough to know that we are dreaming. So this is what Vasishtha is also saying. As long as psychological limitation and conditioning remain in the mind and heart, even in their subtle seed state, it should be regarded as a deep sleep state. It gives rise to the same behaviors, the same perceptions, and even if a state of tranquility is experienced, and even when the mind appears to be self-absorbed or transcended, it is still a source of unhappiness. Such is the state of insentient, asleep beings, conditioned beings. They are not free of self-limitation, but self-limitation is hidden and latent in them, even as flowers are latent in seeds, which, of course, sprout, grow and yield flowers and everything else that we call vegetation. Where the seed of vasana, vasana is tendencies that give rise to self-limitation, or seeds of desire from past experiences. Where the seed of vasana exists, that state is like a deep sleep. It is not enlightenment. When all vasanas are destroyed, even the potentiality of that vasana does not exist. That state is known as the fourth, or turiya, beyond waking, dream and deep sleep. It is a state of transcendental consciousness. It brings about perfection. Vasana, fire, death, disease, enemy, friends, hate, passion, all these are in fact the result of the conditioned mind. To actually know yourself, you have to go beyond these tendencies of the conditioned mind. So, if all the vasanas have been completely removed, then one is established in the state of pure being. Whether such a state is experienced or not in the beginning, soon it becomes the center point of all identity. Such a person is not affected or afflicted by sorrow. The Chitta Shakti, energy consciousness, lies here. It is this Chitta Shakti that determines the nature of all experience. It is the fundamental characteristic of the very molecules of each object. So consciousness underlies the very existence of all that is in the world of experience. If this is not realized as Atma Shakti, the Shakti of your own inner being, the energy of the self, the energy of infinite consciousness, if this is not realized, it creates the delusion that the world of appearance is the real world and not a projection. It is realized as ultimate truth, ultimate being, consciousness, infinite consciousness, the freedom that destroys all sorrow. The non-seeing of this truth is known as avidya or ignorance. Such ignorance is the cause of the belief that the world of appearance or perception is truth, but it is not truth. The truth is the consciousness, which is the source of all phenomena. Even as the arising of the first thought disturbs sleep and ends it, the slightest awakening of our inner intelligence destroys ignorance. When one approaches darkness with light in hand, wishing to behold it, the darkness vanishes. When the light of inquiry is turned on ignorance, ignorance disappears. When one begins to inquire, what is the I of all experience? What is this me, this I? Is it composed of blood, flesh, bone, etc.? When one starts to know the self, the formless being at the heart of all form, at once ignorance ceases to be. That which has a beginning has an end. When all things have a beginning, are ruled out, what remains is the truth, which is the cessation of avidya or ignorance. You may regard it as the everything that has its source in formless being. That is to be sought, which is when ignorance has been dispelled. The sweetness one tastes is not experienced by another. Listening to someone else's description of the cessation of avidya does not give rise to your enlightenment. Each one has to realize it. In short, avidya or ignorance is the belief that there exists a reality which is not consciousness. There exists a reality which is outside of cosmic consciousness. When that ignorance is dispelled, there is the certain knowledge that all is consciousness. That all is consciousness. Again and again I repeat, for the sake of your spiritual awakening, realization of the self does not depend without such repetition or spiritual practice. This ignorance, known as avidya or agyan, has become dense by having been expressed and experienced by the senses in thousands of incarnations within and outside this body. but self-knowledge is not within the reach of the senses. It arises when the senses and the mind, which is the sixth sense, sees. So I was reading from the concise Yoga Vasishta that has been translated by Swami Venkateshananda. But there are many other translations. And as I come back here on Facebook Live, I will be commenting on some of the verses of the Yoga Vasishta as we go through it. Final summary: that which cannot be seen is the seer, but without the seer, there can be no scenery. There can be no process of seeing. And that which cannot be seen is the inner self, that gives rise to the experience of the mind, the body, and the entire universe. Charlie B.L. says, I'm holding that exact book right now, Synchrodestiny. Okay, so my feedback here says 750 people have reacted to this video so far. I hope you will circulate it amongst your friends and get more reactions. I will also post it on Twitter, and we will continue this discussion as we go through the experience of what is called time in our own timeless being. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, and may we all expect the best outcome for our collective consciousness on Tuesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.